Welcome to this episode of Let's Talk 716 Sports. My special guest is Brie, and we will be talking some Sabres hockey. How do you think the Sabres will do the rest of the season?
I think that the Sabres are going to have a little bit of a challenge going into the second half of the season after All-Star break. They do have, according to the Tankathon website, they have the fifth hardest schedule in the league going forward. They play a lot of really good teams that we've struggled against previously. They play Boston twice. They play the Canes once. They play the Devils twice. They play Tampa twice. They play the Leafs twice, and the Stars again. And throughout all of the games that we've played against those teams previously, they have a 2-5-1 record, and they really struggled against those teams, especially when playing at home. Um, and so I think that going into it, it is a challenge, but I do think that it's doable for them to win those games. They've showed some promise. If we ignore the game against Carolina that they had on Wednesday, they've been playing a lot better recently too. And so just kind of going into those with the mindset of challenge but doable, I think it is going to provide better results for the Sabres. Um, and then their health is going to remain a big factor too. I know Thompson's injured at the moment. And I believe that it was reported that that's not going to be as serious of an injury as maybe some people feared. That he should hopefully be good to go when they get back from the 10-day All-Star break. And if not, then I would hope that they would rest him. We would need him more towards the latter end of the season, especially if they're going to make the playoffs. And so really, I do think that it's a challenge going forward. I think that they can do it. I think that it's going to be a good test of what this team is made of and how they respond to challenges. And it will be really interesting to see because we haven't really been in this position in a pretty long time, in 10, 12 years. So yeah, I think going into this half of the season, it's going to be real interesting to watch the Sabres, see what they do.
Do you, do you see us taking one of the two games against Boston?
Think that they could. I do because they already won one game against Boston. They won in overtime at home, which Boston's the best team at home by a mile in the National Hockey League. They are just insane this year, and most of their wins come from their home wins. And the fact that we beat them at home on New Year's Eve, that was quite something. And so I do think that they have it in them to win at least one of those games. I would like to see at least one if they would be able to split at season series with Boston, that would be great. Because I feel like there's also the chance of if they make the playoffs, they play Boston, and so getting that would be kind of a good test going into the postseason. So I think it's possible. Yeah.
What do you think the Sabres will do during the trade deadline?
Mm. There's been a lot of rumors about that, especially the last couple days. Um, I know one name that keeps getting thrown around with the Sabres of a potential move is San Jose Sharks Timo Meyer. So they've kind of been in talks apparently with the Sharks about that. Yeah, I think he could potentially be a good fit depending on who we give up for him. He's big. He's 6'1", 200 pounds, 220 pounds, excuse me. He's 26, which fits within the timeline of our group of players. He still has quite a few good prime years ahead of him playing. The only problem that could kind of come with that is he is going to have a pretty hefty contract eventually. They're expecting a value somewhere in the 9 to 10 million per year range. And the Sabres right now, that's not a problem. However, in the next year or two, they're going to have a lot of really big contracts that they're going to have to give out to guys like Cousins and Darlene and Owen Power when he comes off of his ELC. And so trying to juggle that with maybe a new contract would be a bit of a handful. The new kind of rumor that I've seen, which I find really interesting because I'm also a Canucks fan. Elliot Friedman has been saying that the Sabres are interested in Demko, or he could see Demko as a fit on the Sabres. which would be kind of interesting, I think, because right now we have three goalies that we're running. We're running Anderson, Comrie, and Lukanen, and so adding another one doesn't make much sense unless we offload one of them. I would assume that would be Comrie. That Comrie would be the one going in the trade for Demko. And then you have to wonder about next season because Demko does have some time left on his contract. What do you do with Levi, perhaps? I think Levi would be going to Rochester after he comes out of college. But a Demko trade would be kind of interesting, I think, at the trade deadline just to see. Maybe we can get some goaltending improvements. I'm not one to hate on Comrie. I know that Comrie has a lot of people online that kind of go after him. I don't really think that he's a horrible goaltender. I think that he's good for what we need him for. Um, so I don't necessarily see that as like a must have of like trading for a goalie. But it is interesting that Friedman has been saying that recently because he has a lot of connections in the league. So I don't know if that's just something he personally wants to see or if that's something that's kind of maybe he's hearing rumblings of it around the National Hockey League. And then there's also Jacob Chikrin from the Coyotes. I wrote an article on that actually a little while ago about how that would kind of be a bit of a high risk situation for the Sabres because the Coyotes want a lot for him. They really they were asking for 2 first-round picks in addition to players. And for a team that's still kind of building like the Sabres, I'm not sure if they would want to give up those assets, especially relying on their younger, more talented players that are maybe coming up from Rochester. And so that would be a bigger risk for Adams to take, but I do think that it's still in the realm of possibility for the Sabres.
Do you think that Eric Portillo is gonna come to Buffalo, or do you think he's gonna um like opt out of Buffalo?
I think that he's going to walk. I think that at the trade deadline, that would probably be something Adams should prioritize. Both Eric Portillo and Ryan Johnson, who's at Minnesota right now. Portillo doesn't really have a place anymore on the Sabres. Not with Luukkonen. He's become our starting goalie this season. We expect Levi to at some point also come up, whether he gets a few games at the end of the season or he waits until next year, plays in Rochester, and then comes up. There's just really not much room for him on the roster. So I think it would be both in the Sabres' best interest and in Portillo's best interest to move on, try and get him somewhere else where he's going to actually get playing time. And I think Ryan Johnson is probably in a similar field. I think that our defense core is probably not really like out of space for him, but he just might not fit in Melbourne anymore to where he might have a couple years ago should he had chosen to come to Buffalo instead of going back to school. So I do think that Adams would probably be interested in kind of getting rid of those contracts so we can just get something in return rather than them walking when they graduate this spring.
Um, do you see the Sabres making the playoffs this season?
I think that it's possible. I don't want to be the person that kind of looks at the schedule and goes, "Oh, it's going to be too hard. They're not going to be able to make it and get in." I think they could. I really do. I think that whenever someone asks me like that question of, "Do you think they'll make the playoffs?" My response is maybe. Like it kind of just it depends, and it's not really make it or break it this year. I don't think. I feel like people kind of forget where we were at the beginning of the season, heading into this year. I think that people wanted improvement from last season. They weren't really too concerned about whether or not they were going to make the playoffs. They just wanted to see an improvement in the standings, improvement in players' numbers, things like that. And so I think my feelings on this matter are if they make the playoffs, that's great. That's amazing. I will cry tears of joy and happiness when they do. If they don't, then it's not really that too big of a deal this season. I think next year is going to have a lot more pressure on them, especially considering how many players have had breakout seasons this year. All eyes are going to be on Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin to get this team to the playoffs next season. And there are also going to be a handful of new players probably coming from Rochester, like Cooley for Rosine. And so I think that this year interesting to see them be so close to a wild card spot because they have not been there since I believe 2012 was the last time that they were this close to a wild card spot at the All Star break. Um, but I don't know. I think that they could. I think that I would be thrilled if they did, and I wouldn't be too disappointed if they didn't. But next season I would. Next season, if they don't make the playoffs, I'll be a little disappointed at the timeline.
Um, when did you start writing for the Hockey Writers?
I started writing for the Hockey Writers last November. I saw they were looking for writers, and I believe they still are. If anyone's interested in joining, and yeah, it's really a fun group to be a part of. I'm really enjoying it so far.
Do you have any questions?
Not that I can really think of too much. How do you feel about the Sabres season so far?
Lee, I like when they went like, on that West Coast trip and took the 7 out of 8 points for um the standings and like that the Sabres are in like the wild card spot going into the All-Star break.
I think they're still like a point out because they lost against Carolina, but they're so close, which is the good thing. And the fact that they got those 7 out of 8 points on the road, that was pretty insane to me because like I remember a few seasons ago they'd go out west and they'd come home with like no points. Like it would be a really really tough road trip to sit through and watch to the point where I remember not even like staying up late to watch some of the games that were starting at like 10 o'clock because I just couldn't. But to see that they went on that road trip and they brought home so many points and helped their standings that much, that was really kind of amazing.
Yeah, and like that game against Carolina, it's like um the defense was kind of like flat.
Mhm. Yeah, they had a really off game, which I think wasn't necessarily to be expected from the defense per se, but Carolina is one of the best teams in the league. And so it was going to be a challenge, I think, from the get go. But yeah, I know Samuelson fell a little flat during that game, which was kind of an anomaly for him. So, and that's good too, that the bad games are becoming less and less common for the Sabres. So, because usually the good games, those were the outliers, the winning streaks. And so this year, the outliers within the season have all been the losing streaks. And so that's something that I kind of hold on to whenever they like lose a game like that against Carolina. That there's still a bright spot in all of it.
How do you think we'll do after the 10 day break where they play Calgary?
I think that they could do well with it. I think that resting will be good, especially for guys like Thompson who are like battling an injury. Um, I think that this team does really, really well when they're kept busy too. So it's a little interesting to see the 10-day break, how they're going to respond to that. If they're going to like be a little groggy and need a little bit of time to kind of wake up and get back on track. Because I know that they have a real busy schedule going into March. I think they play like 15 games in March alone. It's just kind of a question of are they going to be like awake and ready to go right after the break?
What do you think of Cal Clegg from the Kings when we picked him up?
I like him. I think that he's been a really good addition on the blue line. I think that we play better with him. Quite honestly, whenever he's in the lineup. And so yeah, I've been a fan of his honestly since the pickup.
Um, where could my viewers find your content at?
So I'm on Twitter mostly. My ad is at Skinner Skating. And so yeah, you can find me on there pretty often. I write for the Hockey Writers, which is just thehockeywriters.com. And that team puts out some amazing content for every team in the league. So definitely check them out. But yeah, I'm always on Twitter.
Um, do you have anything to add before we end the show?
Just go Sabres. Really hoping so they make the playoff push.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see them make the playoffs this upcoming year because we've had a few rough years with the team after 2007.
Mm-hmm. They were going on what 12 years now since they made the playoffs. So there's kids in middle school now that haven't seen the Sabres in a playoff position. So I was fifth grade when they last made the playoffs. So it would be nice to see them do it at some point in my life.
Um, thank you for tuning in or listening to this episode of Let's Talk 716 Sports. Thank you to my special guest, Brie, and go Sabres.
My Sabres.